When is the last time that you actually had to sacrifice? Now, sacrifice to you and sacrifice to me might be different, so I'll let you hold on to your own definition for a moment in time. But when is the last time that you have actually had to sacrifice something? It's Veterans Day. It's a day that we celebrate our vets, and so if there's any vets in here, thank you for risking it all, where many gave it all, where many gave the utmost. There was such a long period in time in our country that every single day a soldier that we didn't know was dying for the freedom that we have. And we take that for granted, and we make it political when they died for the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, and many other freedoms. And they did that willingly. Some drafted way back in Vietnam, but many and most served this country willingly. And it was sacrifice. That every single day they went out, when they put on their military gear, when they put their boots on, they knew that today could be the day that they meet their Maker. Today could be the last day that they take a breath. Today could be the day that they last maybe speak to their family members on a sat phone, or now it's much different. That it could be the last time that they are able to FaceTime with a family member. So when is the last time that you actually had to sacrifice? Now, I ain't talking I had to sacrifice some of my free time because my kid wanted to play a board game, that kind of sacrifice, because that's not really a sacrifice, that's a joy. That's a duty. That's been our thing in our household lately, like this all this week. Every single day has been board games. And I've loved the mess out of it. But that's not really a sacrifice. That's investing in our children. But actually giving up something major, like giving up something that has heavy value for the sake of something or someone else that you deem to be more important or deem to be more worthy. Because that's what sacrifice is. That's what veterans did with their lives. That's what many of us do on a daily basis. It's this act of giving up something valued for the sake of something else regarded as more important or more worthy. Like veterans, more than willing to die for their country by signing up for the military. They knew what they were signing up for. And many gave their utmost for their country. They gave their lives. That they weren't able to see their family ever again this side of heaven. They risked their lives for the freedom that we share. And so being willing to give up something of value for the sake of someone else or something else, because it's more important to you, it's bigger than you, that's a big deal. So when is the last time that you have had to sacrifice? Anybody ever seen the movie John Q? Anybody John Q with Denzel Washington? All right, so check it out. If you haven't seen it yet, I'm not really going to spoil it for you because it's not going to be spoiled for you because you're probably not going to watch it. It's a 2002 movie. But I'm going to give you a brief synopsis. So I will ruin it for you if you ever anticipate, you know what, it's been 17 years, but I'm really going to see that movie. One of these days, I'm going to make time to watch it. So if you weren't going to watch it, I'll just tell you what happens, and then you can go watch it anyways if you want. But his name was John Q. John Quincy Archibald was the guy's name. He was the father. And his son Michael was in like a little league baseball game, and he's running the bases, and he's running from first to second, and all of a sudden he just halfway there, eyes roll up, and he collapses. He collapses right there. His heart fails. Heart fails right there. They rush him to the hospital. They rush him to the emergency room, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And you fast forward down into the movie, and you recognize that Michael's only hope is a transplant. Now this is fast forwarding way along the ways. John Q's insurance isn't covering it. They switched his insurance up without speaking to him, and so his insurance would only cover $20,000 of medical expenses. Well, the transplant's around $250K. And so they were scrambling, they were selling everything, their fridge, their TV, like everything they could possibly think of, raising money. They had a church raise funds, and they gave them an envelope, and they raised, they had to raise 30% of the money. And the hospital didn't care. They're like, oh, you don't have the money. It was a business for them. And so they're like, yeah, well, you can take him home. And the wife was like, no, you do something. You do something now. You make it happen. And she was obviously, as an emotional mother would be, or she's afraid her son is going to die. And so desperate times call for desperate measures, and he did. Well, the first thing that happened in his head was he went to the hospital and into the emergency room, and he talked to the doctor, and the doctor was like, I'm not going to do it. And he's like, listen, you guys do 300 heart surgeries a year at $250,000. That's a ton. That's millions and millions and millions of dollars. You can't do one in good faith when I'm telling you that I'm going to pay you. I raised this much money already. I'm telling you I'm going to pay you. And so the doctor's like, no, you don't have the money. We can't do that. If we do it once, we have to do it every time. And, coming up with a bunch of different excuses. And he finally persuades the doctor to perform the operation. But he needs a heart. The boy needs it. You can't do a heart transplant. So it's funny that Peggy was saying heart transplant over her brain. And that's a topic in here. And Dad is losing his mind. He's like, I'm not going to bury my son. My son is going to bury me. And he wasn't giving up. And he wasn't taking no for an answer. It's like the song we were singing. If you ask, he will do it. He said that. If you ask, he will do it. You don't need to beg. You don't need to beg. And so he takes the emergency room hostage. The hospital members, employees, and the patients in there. And they were like, they don't have hearts. He's like, well, we did tests. We're matching blood types. And so Dad was going to kill himself. Dad was like, how are we going to do this? I'll put a bullet in my head. And they're like, no, you can't do that. And he's like, well, I'm going to do it. And so you're either going to do the operation or 2 people are going to die today, not just one. And so by any means necessary, he's willing to sacrifice his life. And he was, like I said, he was going to put a bullet in his head. And he goes and says goodbye, a very touching thing. I was going to read it, but I was like, no, I'm going to cry if I read that paragraph and what he was talking to his son in his last goodbyes in this operating room. So anyways, he loads one single bullet in the gun and puts it to his head. And he pulls the trigger, but the safety was on. And so you know that, So then he holds the gun to his own head a second time. And he prepares to end his life. And his wife, at that moment, gets a call. If you've seen the movie, a bunch of different times in the movie, it pans into this place where this car, this white BMW with this girl in it was driving reckless on the highway. And she gets in an accident. Turns out she gets in an accident, she dies. And that heart is a perfect match only for the son, whose name is Michael. And so wife gets told about this, and they're panicking. They're like, oh my gosh, we have a match, and it's on its way here. And so the wife is running down to the emergency room, trying to get down there to let them know, like, don't do it. Mom knows already what he was going to do. And she runs to the emergency room to stop John from shooting himself. And they tell him, and John lets the hostages free. And obviously there was a bunch of stuff that goes on with the hostage stuff, but there ends up being a trial, and the police and the detective let the dad stay in there while they did the heart surgery on his son, and his son wanted to be a bodybuilder. And so all throughout the movie, the son is like, yeah, and he's flexing low and high, and so he wanted to be a bodybuilder. And so after they have the trial, and he's like, hey, he's not guilty of attempted murder, he's not guilty of armed criminal action, but they find him guilty for kidnapping, right? And so it doesn't say what his sentence was. But at the end of the movie, the father is in the squad. They have the case, and they're like, the hearing for the sentencing will be next week. And he gets up in this squad car, and then his son, as it's pulling away, his son goes out in the street, and his son just gives him one flex, and one flex like that. And when he was leaving, he said, his son was like, goodbye, Dad. He said, no, there's no goodbyes. Let's just see you later. But I talk about this because in here, you have this father who is willing to risk his life, to give up his life, so that his son can live. Sacrifice. And then he sacrificed his freedom, so his son, again, could live. He sacrificed everything. And so when I'm talking sacrifice, maybe you've, I don't think any of us have been in that situation where we're talking about that kind of sacrifice. But it is kind of a big deal. And so, in light of that, when is the last time you had to sacrifice? When is the last time that you had to sacrifice? Right? he did all that he knew to do. At some point in your life, there's a very good chance that God is going to ask you to do a major sacrifice. And as your pastor, and as a pastor, it would be wrong if we didn't address it. That God may ask you to sacrifice your career. He may ask you to sacrifice your finances. He may ask you to uproot and move your family to a different location. Who even knows the risk, right? But he may ask you to sacrifice. And you have to be willing to walk in obedience. John Q didn't want to bury his son. So whether it's career for you, maybe God is speaking to you about a career. Maybe God is speaking to you about, hey, you need to give this. You need to do that. You need to go there. You need to risk your life. Will you? That's the real humbling question. Will you be willing to sacrifice when it presents itself? And notice that I said when. I didn't say if. I said when. Because every one of us is going to have to risk sacrificing something in our lives. And so we're in Genesis 22 today. Abraham did it. Abraham had to sacrifice. So I'm going to read Genesis 22, verses 1 through 18. So if you have your Bible, A to the men. If you have a phone, it still works as a Bible. And if not, we do have two screens that read it up there. So it's going to be verses 1 through 18 if you would stay with me. It says, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. Now keep in mind, they couldn't have a son, like they were barren. And so he waited years and years and years and years in his life to get the son. This is the thing that he wanted the most. And so now God is asking him to offer his son up as a burnt offering. That means put him on fire and burn him and kill him. So some of y'all are like, why would God do that? We'll get there. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young man, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. I'm sure there was with a crying voice in there. And he said, here I am, my son. He said, behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went both of them together. When they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. Raised up his hand and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham! Abraham! And he said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the name of that place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Verse 15, and the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offerings as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. what sacrifice looks like for us, maybe now, what it looked like in the past, or what it looks like in the future. So God bless the reading of your word. I pray that I would decrease, that you would increase, that this would be all about you. From Genesis to Revelation, your word is all about you. So I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would also be all about you. In Jesus' precious name, amen. And so here we are. We're in Genesis 22 and 1 through 18. And listen, I'm not here to tell you how to sacrifice. I'm not here to tell you how you will be tested, because I'm going to be honest, I have no clue. I don't even know how I'm going to be tested when it's time to be tested. But I am here to tell you that you will. That sacrifice will be necessary at some point. At some point, you are going to be tested. God tested Abraham right here in the text, and he didn't test him to trip him up or catch him slipping, but he tested him to deepen his capacity for God. He tested him to deepen his character. It wasn't, I'm just testing you to test you. He was testing him to deepen his character. In the same way that ore has to be heated up really, really hot. Ore needs the fire to refine it to get all the precious metals out, is the same way that God will refine us through our difficult circumstances. Now listen, we can complain in our circumstances like everybody else in the world does, or we can walk in obedience to see how God is stretching us. Now we don't ever want to ask that question like, when we're walking through the fire, most of us are not going to be like, all right, God, so listen, this really sucks, but can you show me where this is relevant? Because most of us, when it really sucks, we don't want to talk to God, or our desperation isn't about, hey, God, show me what this is for. Our desperation is more of, get me out of this. Get me through this. If you can end this right now, that would be great. So, my first point today, if you are going to move forward, if you are going to go deeper in your journey with Christ, you got to be willing to sacrifice. Super simple first point. You got to be willing to sacrifice. When God says do this, 99 times out of 100, do this means you're going to have to sacrifice something else. Do this means I'm going to have to give up something else to do that. And then really, that's a test right there. Are you willing to go deeper, or is it all about you? You know what, back in the day, I was dating this girl. This is way before Tatiana. This is actually 3.5 years before Tatiana. But I was dating this girl, and we were super serious. And we had mapped out everything with a timeline, marriage, kids. We had it all figured out, right? And I was working security at this church that I ended up becoming the youth pastor for down the road. But she was a non-believer, right? I met her at the club where I used to bounce. And according to the world standard, we had a really good relationship, right? We were super serious. And so God has this interesting way of hitting you where it hurts. Like, oh, you said you love me? All right, cool. So, hey, he says in his word, he says, hey, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with the darkness? And so, man, God didn't just hit me with a right. He hit me with a right hook, a left cross, an uppercut, a couple jabs in there. I mean, he was really laying on me because, like, all right, I'm with this girl I really love. I think I'm going to marry her. We got everything mapped out. We kind of mapping all the things in our life, right? And he hits me with that. And if I was going to move forward, God made it very clear what I needed to do. It was crystal clear. You either, A, you present the gospel and you pray that she says yes to Jesus, and y'all can move forward together. But if she doesn't say yes, and then you don't propose it as an ultimatum, but if she doesn't say yes, she ain't for you. Because I've called you to greater things. And y'all not being equally yoked is going to create dissension. You want to go to church on Monday, y'all got 3 kids, and 2 kids want to go to church, and 1 kid wants to stay at home with the other person. You're not together anymore. You're divided. You're divided. And so in light of that, I presented the gospel, and in the only way that I knew how, and she didn't receive it, and so then I ended the relationship that day. Like I said, we were serious, and wonderful human being, but we weren't here. And the scripture doesn't say that by accident. Now let me throw a disclaimer out there for some of y'all folk who are married too. Listen. If your spouse isn't the believer and you are, that does not mean get a divorce. Okay, I'm rebuking that thought right now, so don't leave this place like, my pastor said I gotta get a divorce because we ain't equally yoked, so Don't be an idiot, okay? You continue to be Jesus with skin onto your spouse, because chances are you both weren't saved when you got together. Majority of the time, that's how it is. Neither one of you was saved, and then one of y'all had an encounter with Jesus. And so now it's on your plate to continue to love your spouse, to continue to pray for your spouse, to continue to be Jesus with skin on. To continue to engage them and love them, not leave them like, oh, you don't believe what I believe, so I'm outro. No, that's stupid, and that doesn't work. And eventually what's going to happen is they'll come around. Eventually, right? But we don't know what that timeline looks like. But you can only reject true love for so long. You can only reject true love so long. And you know what? And if they don't ever come around, then you just continue to pray for their soul. And it is what it is. But that's the disclaimer piece. There's no outs on that. All right. So, anyways, like I said, he told me on a Sunday that that's what I needed to do. Hit me in the mouth during the service, and I took care of it that afternoon. And that was the hardest conversation I've ever had in my entire life. To this day, it was the hardest conversation ever. Because now what happened is just like Abraham, God was wanting me to be willing to sacrifice someone or something so my actions would then line up with what my mouth was saying. In other words, talk is cheap. You can say that you love me, but if you don't act on it, you don't love me. You can say it till you're blue in the face, but if what you say doesn't line up with what you do, I ain't buying it. And God's not stupid. He's God. He knows all things. So you think you're going to pull the wool over God's eyes? He only created the universe, but he's not going to be able to figure out your lies. Right? And so God was like, hey, all right, you said I love you, Lord. Okay. You love me? Do you love me more than her? Because it doesn't seem that way. Because when y'all walking in sin, you don't seem to love me more than her. When you're walking in disobedience to what my word says and what I've been telling you since you said yes to me, that don't line up. You don't love me more than you love her. And Abraham was the same thing. Abraham was asked to sacrifice his long-awaited son. God was testing him. Like I said, to strengthen his character, to deepen his commitment to God. He learned to obey God, and he learned to trust God's ability to provide for him. He walked in obedience, and God would then provide. And so, God hits me with the same thing he does here, but it's a little different. God asked me to sacrifice the relationship I was in because it was what I wanted, maybe what she wanted, but it wasn't what he wanted. And that was something that I'd longed for my whole life. Like a lot of, stupid sin, premarital sex choices I made in my life. Let's be honest. Ain't nobody in here saying, so I'm not worried about anybody judging me anyway. So, but we all sin and we've all fallen short of the glory of God. Right? But in light of that, God was like, all right, you gonna trust me like you say that you love me? Because if you love me, then you would trust me. And so I was longing for that connection, that intimacy, that marriage. Because I'll be honest, my parents had like the most amazing marriage ever. They beefed and they butted heads all the time, but they had an amazing marriage filled with amazing love, right? And so God was testing me to strengthen my character and deepen my commitment to him in the same way that he was doing to Abraham. And I too, just like Abraham, had to learn to obey God with the opportunity, take it and obey, and trust God in his ability to provide what I had been longing for. And so God shows us in this text, God shows us through the mess of my life too, that through this story, that sacrifice requires obedience. And that's the next point. That's my second point today. Sacrifice requires complete obedience. It requires complete obedience. It is difficult to let go of something that you deeply love. Anybody agree? Amen. It is difficult to let go of something that you deeply love. There is a good chance that the thing that God may ask you to sacrifice one day is going to be something that you love the most. It may be an idol. It may be something that you put in the place of God. It may be a person that should have been cut off a long time ago. But there's a good chance the thing that God is asking you to let go of the most was something that you actually loved more than God. Because let's think about it. If it wasn't easy, would it be sacrifice? Like if it was easy, it wouldn't be sacrifice. It would just be another decision that I had to make. And do I go up to this room or to this room? I mean, that's essentially what that decision would be like. But Sacrifice requires complete obedience. 6 years ago, I posted something on Facebook early this morning when I took a break from going over my stuff. And I saw something that I posted, and I was like, oh wow, that's kind of right on for today, just 6 years behind. And this is what the status said. It said, weak men only do easy things. Now keep in mind, men can be substituted for women. I was reading a book about manhood being restored and men acting like men. So it's for women too. Alright, so substitute that in there. Put a woe in front of the men and then you're done. So weak men only do easy things. It's not the path of least resistance, but the path of most glory. Men, do something that costs you. Women, do something that costs you. Do something that is a risk. Do something that requires sacrifice. Don't be a weak man. Don't be a weak woman. Be a God's man and be a God's woman. It's like, wow, that was 6 years ago. That's right on for today. Holy Spirit, you are all part of this. And listen, I know that obedience can be hard. Is obedience hard? I got like 6 amens, a couple head nods, and some of y'all are like, is it hard? I'm just kidding. I hope you're not like that. But like quitting or changing your career, I would say that it's hard because some of us, we've been in that career that we have, maybe something that we went to school for, and so that's all we've ever known. So I'm keeping it buck. I've entertained the idea many, many times on stepping away from teaching. I mean, eventually I'm going to have to step away from everything else for full-time ministry anyways. But I've entertained the idea of stepping away from teaching because sometimes it can be a bit much. But that was me entertaining, not because God was saying to do it. But sometimes changing your career is hard because sometimes it's all that we've ever known. Sometimes cutting toxic people out is hard because they're usually the ones who've been around since day one. Sometimes the most toxic people are the people that have been around you since day one. Like the original, like the real OG, triple OG, you've been my friend, you've been my ride or die since day one. And sometimes those are the toxic people that God is saying, when are you going to realize that that's not good for you? You kicking it with that person every single day is like drinking bleach. It's going to kill you. The word says bad company corrupts good morals. Now that does not mean that you can't hang out with somebody that's not saved, because that's trash. Okay, because otherwise you can't engage culture. But if every single day you're hanging out with a group of people who, every single day, I'm not talking every now and then, because listen, I'm nobody. I am nobody. I'm a beggar who got the bread. So I am not, oh, you got to be a part of this club for me to kick it with. No, I will hang out with everybody and judge nobody because I was a scumbag before Jesus. And if I was to walk away from Jesus, I would be a scumbag again. But sometimes you gotta cut some people off. And it's hard when you cut them off. But a little bit down the road, you're like, wow, I feel free again. I feel better again. Selling everything. Like, what if God told you to sell everything? Like, selling everything would be hard because the things that you're selling would be hard because you're attached to it. I don't really want to sell that. I really love that thing. Like, man, like that would be hard because you have this attachment to it. Or giving things away that you love would be hard because you're getting nothing in return for it. Like God says, hey, give away all your money. Like, hey, you've got 6,000 in savings, right? Whatever, just throw a number in there. And God's like, hey, I need you to give your savings away. And you'd be like, well, you know, see what had happened was the way my account was set up. Like, man, God, that's 6K. Like, yes. I'm not going to get anything in return. Like, that would be hard for most of us. It would probably be hard for all of us. So giving away your money would be hard as well. Like, if God's saying, give your money away, like, shoot. Why do you think so many people don't tithe? Ooh, shots fired. Right? Oh, he's talking about money. I'm going to a different church. Let's just be honest. Can we talk about it? Like, people don't want to give their money away. People don't want to tithe. Like, 5% of churches tithe. Like, 5% of people in churches tithe. The numbers are staggering crazy. Right? Because people don't trust God with their finances. Because more times than not, their finances is their God. So, like ending a premarital relationship. It's hard because we long for connection. We long for a relationship. We long for the lust effect. We long for how we're going to feel when certain acts are done. Walking in your calling is hard because it's bigger than you. Like, your calling is bigger than you. And you don't think that you got what it takes. But if God had called you to do something, He'd already equipped you with what you needed to go and do what He called you to do. He qualified you, and He called you, and those go hand in hand. He's not going to call you to do something that you're not qualified to. You may not think it, but God has given you everything that you need. Everything that you need is already in God. And so when we give God what He asks, so God asks you to sacrifice, and you give God what He asks, I can promise you this, that He's going to return far more than you could dream. He's going to return far more than what you had to sacrifice. Now, some of us, that might be a stretch to believe because some of us worship a lot of things that aren't God. We have multiple gods in our life. Our idols, the things that we focus and we worry about so much, like some of those are our gods. And so God is probably going to call you to give up one or two or all of those things, depending on what you have in your life. And He's going to return far more than you could dream. Like check it out. Like, He asked me to give up that relationship, right? And 3 years later, He sent me this most amazing wife. He sent me this amazing woman of God that is way more than y'all probably get sick of me talking about Tatiana, but no. My priorities in my life is God, it's marriage, and it's family. Like, that should be the hierarchy for every single person. It should be God first, marriage second, family. If you put your kids over your wife or your husband, your relationship with your spouse is going to be dysfunctional. If you put either one of those bottom two on top of God, everything's going to be dysfunctional because the hierarchy is wrong. It should be God as number one. And so I talk about God all the time, so naturally the second thing that I'm going to talk about the most is going to be my wife. So if you don't like it, hashtag deal with it. It is what it is, right? But He gave me this amazing wife. And check it out, I made this expansive list. My pastor's wife at the time gave me, she's like, you're looking for, you want to get married one day, right? Yeah, of course I want to get married. Like, that's probably what I long for besides to do what God says the most. She's like, make a list and be very detailed. Be as vain as you want. Make a list of everything that you're looking for in a spouse. Like, I'd encourage you, like, if you're looking for a spouse, like, do that. You become aware of things, and then you kind of filter out things that don't fit that. And it's okay if it's super vain and you're looking at body types and you're looking for this perfect person, because there's going to be some of those things that are negotiable, right? Tap was way above my list, except for cooking. She couldn't cook when we got married. She cooked now. So God totally redeemed the one thing that she couldn't do, but everything else that I wasn't looking for, she had as well. She was above and beyond everything I could look for. So had I not walked in obedience and ended that stupid relationship that wasn't glorifying to God, I wouldn't have gotten her. Which means I also wouldn't have gotten these amazing children of mine. I wouldn't have gotten Isabella, and I wouldn't have gotten Manny. And then along with that, God, marriage, family, call, right? Call. Well, had I not walked in obedience, not only would I have missed all of that, but I wouldn't have been propelled to walk in my calling. Like, real talk, I said, I ended that, and a month later, I can't even make this up, I wish I could, but that would be a really good storyteller, but 1 month later, after I ended that relationship, God told me that He was calling me to be a pastor, plant a church, and preach the Bible. 1 month. When I was willing to sacrifice the things of this world for the God of this universe, He began to show me what my calling was. And so then I became mindful of it. And so then I began to look at things differently, because I'm looking for things that fall in place. I'm looking for alignment. God revealed to me what my calling was, and I would have missed it had I was with old girl. And I would have not had my kids, and I would have not had my spouse, and I probably would have had a whole lot of drama because of unequally yoked. Like, the spiritual benefits of God's blessings outweigh your sacrifice. Let me say it again for y'all folk who fell asleep. The spiritual benefits of God's blessings outweigh the things that you had to sacrifice to get there. When you give up what God wants you to give up for why He wants you to give it up, even though you didn't want to give it up, you're going to get more than you ever wanted. When you give up what God is telling you to give up, even though you don't want to give it up, you're going to get more out of that deal than you think. You have to walk in obedience. Which leads to my final point, and I'll be out your way. Blessings follow obedience. Blessing follows obedience. Right? It follows obedience. You have to be willing to sacrifice. Sacrifice requires obedience. Otherwise, it wouldn't be sacrifice. It would just be an easy decision to make. And blessing follows obedience. Listen, blessing isn't always immediate. Okay? He told me my call in a month, but I didn't walk in it for 8 years. Okay? So, put that one together, right? So, it may not always be immediate, but rest assured it's coming. If you're walking in obedience, the blessing that follows obedience is coming. And listen, it might not be here yet because you ain't ready. You're not ready to handle the things that God wanted to give you. You got to show obedience with the little things before he's going to ask you to walk in obedience for the big things. Check out verses 15 through 18. And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this, and you have not withheld your son, your only son. I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, as the sand that is on the seashore. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring," check this out, "and in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." When I look at these verses, it's like Abraham, he receives abundant blessings because why? He obeyed God. He obeyed God. I'll say it again, he obeyed God. God promised to give Abraham's descendants the ability to conquer their enemies. Flat out, they did. He also promised him children and grandchildren who would bless the whole earth. Flat out, he did, and here we are. What you do in your act of obedience, what you do in your sacrifice to be obedient, the blessing that's going to follow, it may not affect you. Or it may not just affect you. You're setting up the next generations with your obedience. Your obedience. Verse 18. "And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." People's lives aren't just going to be changed as a result of your obedience. Their lives are going to be changed because your obedience affected the blessing over your children and their children and their children. And as a result of knowing the faith of Abraham and his descendants, the blessing followed the obedience. But some of y'all out here wondering, like, why are you not blessing me, God? And God's like, why are you not walking in obedience? I told you what you need to do. I'm waiting. It's like John, I keep on waiting on the world to change. Why is he waiting on the world to change? Because he called you to change the world. But it's going to be hard. Duh. Like, of course it's going to be hard. I told you, I didn't say it was going to be easy. I said it was going to be worth it. Sometimes the blessing that follows obedience isn't a gift for you. It's not always a gift for you. But we're so selfish that it's all about me. Like, it's all about me. Sometimes the blessing that follows obedience overflows to others from here through eternity. Sometimes it's not for you, it's for eternity. When's the last time you made a sacrifice? And what is God asking you to sacrifice right now? And know that if you say yes to that sacrifice, there's a whole lot of blessing that's coming. And we don't do it to be blessed. We do it because we already are. And that blessing is just going to trickle down to the next generation, to the next. You love your kids? You love your future kids? Walk in obedience. You love your grandbabies and your great-grandbabies that you may not ever meet? Walk in obedience. You want to see the world change? Walk in obedience. You want to see brothers and sisters get saved? Walk in obedience. You want to see your friends and family and people that you don't even know, you want to see the streets cleared out? Walk in obedience. Because what's happening is he's raising up believers who are going to be world changers that can do what you can't do. Amen. That are going to kill it for the glory of God. And the only way they can do that is if you are willing to walk in obedience. Amen. Knowing that the blessing wasn't just going to be for you. It was going to be for generation to generation to generation to generation to generation. From here till eternity, the blessing follows obedience. Let's pray.